I was about a month into my night shifts as a janitor at St. Paul's Hospital. The hospital was pretty quiet at night, just me and the low hum of the fluorescent lights. I was 32, working to pay off my student loans while studying to be a nurse. Most nights, I kept my head down and focused on my tasks, cleaning the endless corridors. One night, around midnight, I started to hear it. A soft, eerie melody coming from the old surgical wing. It sounded like a lullaby. At first, I thought it was just the patients talking. But when I wiped the waiting room chairs, I heard it again. My heart raced, but I told myself it was nothing. Just my imagination. The murmurs grew every night. Patients whispering to people who weren't there, looking scared but talking to shadows. I felt a chill run down my spine. I cleaned nearby rooms, glancing toward the surgical wing. Something was pulling at me, begging me to listen, but I didn't want to. I shook it off. On another night, I was emptying the trash in the hallway. That melody wrapped around me again. My pulse quickened. I knew I should turn back, but curiosity got the better of me. The nurses always warned us about that area. Stay away from the old surgical wing, they said. Things happen there. You don't want to see what we've seen. But my mind raced with questions. What had they seen? While scrubbing the floor tiles, I stopped. I could hear a woman's voice now, sweet and soft, cutting through the silence. I rationalized it, but it felt real. My breath quickened as a shadow moved at the edge of my vision. I turned around, but no one was there. Suddenly, I heard a soft cry, then laughter. It came from beyond the surgical wing doors. I took a step back, my heart pounding. I muttered to myself, maybe it's just my imagination. But I had to know what was happening. I moved closer to the doors, every instinct told me to run. And then, I saw him. A figure stood at the entrance of the surgical wing. He wasn't moving. I couldn't see his face. Just staring at me. Are you okay? I called out, but there was no answer. Only silence. Then, he asked, why are you here? I turned to look back, but nobody was there. Just the long, dark hallway behind me. My skin crawled. It felt wrong. I didn't know what to do. Should I call someone? Should I run? I turned back to the entrance, but the figure was gone. I stood there for a moment, trying to catch my breath. The quiet returned, but the melody remained in the air, haunting me. I couldn't shake it off. I felt like I was caught in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I finished my shift that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. Who was he? What did he mean? That question still lingers, haunting me every time I walk those cold halls alone. The next night, I arrived for my shift feeling restless. I tried to push the memory of the figure out of my mind, but it lingered like the scent of antiseptic in the air. As I made my way through the quiet halls, the same melody began to creep in, soft and chilling. I glanced towards the surgical wing, its dim light flickering like a heartbeat. I focused on cleaning the common areas first, but the lullaby was relentless. It wrapped around me, pulling me closer to that forbidden place. Just finish your duties, I whispered to myself. You're just a janitor. I needed to keep busy, to ignore the nagging urge to investigate. As the hours dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me. I took out the garbage from a nearby room and paused. The sound of footsteps echoed behind me, steady and slow. My heart raced as I turned, but it was just the settling of the building. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. Then, the laughter returned, louder this time, a haunting echo. It felt alive, like it was coming from the surgical wing itself. I stared at the frosted glass doors, half terrified, half intrigued. Did someone need help? Maybe a patient was in distress. My instincts kicked in. I had to check it out. As I stepped closer, my breath caught. The doors swung open slightly, as if inviting me in. I hesitated and glanced around. No one was in sight. The hospital seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. Gathering courage, I pushed the door and stepped into the dark corridor of the surgical wing. The air turned cold, and the melody wrapped around me once again. I walked slowly, each step echoing in the empty hallway. I reached a room halfway down the corridor, its door slightly ajar. I peered inside, my pulse quickening. The room was dim, but I could make out surgical tools gleaming under a thin layer of dust. That's when I saw it. In the corner, a small child sat on the floor, staring blankly at a shadowy figure hovering near the wall. My throat tightened as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I moved closer, but the child didn't look up. Instead, the figure turned, its face obscured but its presence undeniably real. "Hey," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Are you all right?" The child finally glanced at me, eyes wide with fear. The figure shifted slightly, as if aware of my approach. "Why are you here?" the child echoed in a soft voice. A chill ran through me at those words, clear as the night air. Before I could respond, the shadow moved closer to me, and the lullaby grew louder. Panic surged. I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to flee. I had come too far. I couldn't turn away now, not when I could help. But every fiber of my being told me to run. Then everything went dark. I stumbled back into the hallway, heart racing. The laughter had turned to cries, echoing through the darkness. I could feel something behind me, breathing, inching closer. And when I turned around, I wasn't alone. I stood there, frozen. The figure, now distinct in the dim light from the surgical wing, loomed before me. It was taller than any person I'd ever seen, almost ethereal, with elongated limbs and a head that seemed to blend into the shadows. My first instinct was to bolt, to flee the nightmare unfolding in front of me. But I couldn't. It felt like I was stuck in molasses, gripped by terror. "Who are you?" I finally managed to croak out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond, it simply tilted its head, observing me, its empty eyes searching mine. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was reading my thoughts. The child, still huddled in the corner, began to sob softly. "Please," I urged, a desperate plea escaping my lips. "Are you hurt?" It was a stupid question, but I didn't know what else to say. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I fought against the impulse to scream. The shadowy figure stepped closer, and the child clutched their knees, hiding their face. "It'll make you stay," the child said in a strained voice. I didn't understand. My heart raced as I considered the implications. Stay? What did that mean? "I don't want to stay," I whispered, shaking my head. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls, and I felt a surge of unease. I needed to get out. But as I turned to run, the hallway transformed. The once familiar corridor stretched out into a void, dark and boundless. I felt a weight at my back, an unseen force pulling me towards the figure. My instincts kicked in, and I fought against it, pressing my palms against the cold, smooth walls. "Help me!" I shouted, hoping someone might hear, but all that met my ears was the cacophony of cries. The child's voice cut through the chaos. "You can't escape," they called, a mixture of fear and resignation lacing their words. I must have imagined it, but in that moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope in the child's tear-stained face. The air shifted again. A whisper, soft and melodic, filled the space. "Stay with us," it beckoned, and I felt my resolve begin to waver. The figure seemed to pulse with life, drawing me towards it, enticing me with promises of understanding and release from the weight of my reality. No, I couldn't give in. Panic surged anew as I broke free from the pull, sprinting back toward the exit. The shadows reached for me, their icy fingers brushing against my skin. I could hear the lullaby growing louder, the voices merging into a haunting chorus. It felt like every floorboard protested with each of my hurried steps. Then, just as I thought I was going to escape, I crashed into something solid. I stumbled, and when I looked up, I was no longer in the surgical wing. I had found myself back in the common area, the sterile lights overhead humming quietly against the panic racing through my veins. But the feeling of being watched persisted, and as I caught my breath, I turned. The figure was gone, yet something told me it was still out there, lurking in the shadows. My heart hammered in my chest as I glanced around, searching for any sign of that eerie presence. That's when I noticed something on the floor, a small, crumpled piece of paper. I leaned down, my hands trembling as I picked it up. It wasn't just any paper, it was the drawing of a child with wide eyes staring into a void. I took a deep breath. I had to know what the drawing meant. I had to face whatever was haunting the surgical wing, or it would haunt me for the rest of my nights. And in that moment, I realized, this was far from over. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to that drawing. It felt like a message, a breadcrumb leading deeper into whatever chaos awaited me. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my pocket, casting one last glance at the common area. The sterile lights flickered, and I could have sworn I heard something rustling behind me. I headed toward the surgical wing again, knowing I couldn't ignore whatever had happened. The air felt heavier this time, infused with an almost palpable tension. Shadows shifted along the walls, dancing like they were alive. The hallway seemed to stretch longer with each step, swallowing my resolve. My heart raced, but I forced myself to push open the door to the surgical wing. The sterile surroundings felt alien and threatening, and every sound echoed ominously. I crept into the room, eyes darting to every corner. It was emptier, so I thought. Then I noticed the table, a surgical table that looked as if it had been used recently. Stains, dark and unsettling, marred its surface. I stepped closer, my stomach twisting. That's when I blinked and caught movement, a shape flitting across the far wall. I turned quickly, but it was gone. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. The silence stretched, thickening until I could hardly breathe. Then, from behind me, I heard it again, a light rustle, like fabric brushing against skin. I spun around, heart pounding, and almost jumped back as a shadow unveiled itself beneath the light. A figure lay curled at the foot of the surgical table, a girl, no older than 10, with matted hair and dirty clothes. Her eyes were wide and vacant, mirroring the drawing I found. "Are you real?" I whispered, my voice barely a sound. She didn't respond, tears tracing down her cheeks. "Help me," she breathed, her voice frail. "They keep looking for me." My heart sank. "Who?" I asked, desperate for clarity. "They're everywhere. They want me to stay." Her gaze drifted to the shadows, and for a second, it felt like the darkness itself was listening. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. I jumped, adrenaline surging, and turned to see the door I had come through slam shut on its own. Panic clawed at me. "No, no, no!" I shouted, rushing to the door, pulling on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I turned back to the girl. "We need to get out," I shouted. "They'll catch us," she whimpered, shaking her head. "It's too late." The shadows grew thicker, swirling ominously around her. I felt the air grow colder, and dread wrapped around me like a vice. That's when I noticed a glint on the floor. I knelt down, desperate for any weapon, any hope. It was a small scalpel, its blade gleaming under the harsh lights. "Do you trust me?" I asked the girl, holding the scalpel tightly. She nodded slowly, fear evident in her eyes. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. "Okay, then let us find a way out of here." Just as I turned towards the door, I heard the whispers again, echoing through the air. Stay with us, stay with us." I shut my eyes tight, gritted my teeth, and opened the door. In that instant, everything changed. The door creaked open, and I stumbled into the hallway, clutching the scalpel. The shadows pressed close, as if they had fingers trying to grip my arms. I turned back. The girl was still crouched by the table, her eyes wide, pleading. I hesitated. "Come on," I urged her. "We can't stay here." With a shaky breath, she pushed herself up, dusting off her clothes with trembling hands. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice shaking. Every instinct screamed to run, but the air felt thick around us, as if we were wading through a fog of dread. Just then, a low growl reverberated through the corridor, echoing from somewhere deep inside the building. My heart dropped. I had never heard that sound before, but in the eerie silence that followed, it felt strangely familiar, like the voice of fear personified. Is it them?" I asked, looking at her. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. The shadow shifted again, and I felt a chill creep along my spine. We need to hurry, I insisted, pushing forward, dragging her with me. The surgical wing opened up into a larger expanse filled with abandoned hospital equipment. A murky light flickered above, revealing broken furniture and shattered glass scattered across the floor. The lingering smell of antiseptic mixed with decay was overwhelming. Every few steps, I glanced around, expecting something to leap at us from the shadows. The girl grabbed my hand tighter. They don't want me to leave. They think I'm one of them. What do you mean? I asked, confused. Before she could answer, another sound made us both freeze, a soft scraping noise coming from an adjacent room. My instincts screamed to run, but I wanted to understand what was happening. I tiptoed to the door and nudged it open. Peeking inside, the room was dimly lit, with a single hospital bed in the center. I felt a sinking terror as I noticed a mysterious figure hunched over the bed, scribbling something on a pad of paper. An outline of a person, blurred and indistinct, smudged against the light. Please, the girl whimpered beside me. We can't stay. It can't see us. My pulse raced. I wanted to pull her back and escape, but something pulled me closer to the door. I needed to know who or what that figure was. Then, a piece of paper fluttered to the floor, drifting like a leaf falling in mid-autumn. That S when I saw it, a sketch that mirrored the drawing I had found earlier. The same twisted shapes, the same haunting images. A chill gripped me as realization dawned. This figure was recreating those horrors on the pad. Suddenly, the figure turned. I saw the glint of an eye staring right at me. Time froze, and dread coiled in my throat. Run! I shouted, grabbing the girl and sprinting down the corridor. As we fled, I could hear it behind us, heavy footsteps pursuing, whispering fragments of words that gnawed at my sanity. Stay with us, don't go. We rounded a corner, darting into another hallway that felt narrower, darker. My breath was ragged, my legs burning. What were we running from? Why didn't the girl fight? Then a door loomed ahead. I grabbed the handle, yanked it open, and pulled her through just as I heard that sinister voice call out, beckoning us. But this doorway led to an empty room, another dead end. Panic surged. There were no windows, no other exits. Just the aftermath of chaos that tightened around me. What now? I gasped, scrambling for a plan. The girl looked up, her expression shifting. We have to face them. As the footsteps grew nearer, dread washed over me again, but something else ignited deep inside, an urge to survive, to fight. I looked at the scalpel in my hand. What do we do? I asked, scrambling to find a way out. Then everything fell silent. The echoes of our heartbeat filled the void as I caught a glimpse of something lurking just out of sight, waiting for a chance to strike. And in the chilling stillness, I realized the hunt was far from over. The silence was deafening, suffocating even. I could feel the girl's grip tightening around my wrist, her eyes darting between the door and the shadows. I didn't want to think about what might be on the other side, but I could sense that whatever was coming was not going to give us mercy. We can't just wait here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My instincts screamed at me to act, but where could we go? The dim light in the room didn't offer much comfort, and every corner seemed to harbor something unseen. Maybe we can, she started, but her voice broke, and I could see the fear in her eyes only intensifying. Maybe we can hide. Hiding did not sound like a strong plan anymore. I glanced at the room, assessing our options. There was a storage closet in the corner that might work, but the idea of squeezing ourselves into a dark space felt like sealing our fate. Just then, a loud bang echoed outside the door. It jolted me back to the present. I flinched, and adrenaline surged through me. Whatever was chasing us was getting closer. They found us. I blurted out, and that's when I noticed the girl's expression change. She looked at me with partial recognition, and I could see something calculate in her wide, nervous eyes. Sometimes, they have to let you in before they let you go, she whispered, as if reminiscing about something I didn't understand. Let us in? What are you talking about? I pressed, the urgency rising. I could feel the shadows pressing in on us, as if they had ears, waiting to pick up our conversation. The girl stepped back, shaking her head. The drawings, they let me in, she murmured. That's how they find me, but I have to be fast. When they come, she swallowed hard, stealing a glance at the door. You can't let them see you. Before I could ask more, another noise echoed heavier this time, as if something or someone had collided with the building's walls. The door rattled, and I felt a primal fear clench in my gut. Please, we have to go, I urged, adrenaline coursing through me. I grabbed the scalpel and led her toward the storage closet instead. Time felt like it was slipping away as I pulled the door open and ushered her inside. We huddled together in the cramped space, the darkness enveloping us like a thick blanket. I held my breath, but my heart was pounding so loudly it seemed to blot out everything else. We waited in silence, straining to hear what was happening in the hallway. Suddenly, the door to the room creaked open. My hand instinctively tightened around the scalpel, ready for anything. Footsteps entered the room, and I could barely make out a figure in the dim light. The air felt charged with malevolence, like static before a storm. For an agonizing moment, we were frozen in the closet, breaths shallow and silent. The figure lingered near the bed, the floor creaking under its weight. I felt sweat trickle down my back as the dread coiled tighter. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its gaze probing, searching for us. Then, in an abrupt shift, it turned and moved toward the closet door. Instinctively, I pressed the girl back against the wall. Just as it reached out, something clattered. I gasped as a medical tray tipped over, sending instruments clanging to the floor. The figure whirled around, distracted. Now! I hissed, and we burst from the closet and made for the opposite wall. But as we fled, I stumbled over something, a sharp object hidden in the debris. In that moment, I realized the figure was shifting, following us again, slowly regaining its focus. With a glance at the girl, desperation took hold. We need to escape. Then everything went dark. The world around us dimmed, and a pulse of fear blazed within me. I fumbled in the pitch black, trying to find my bearings. Where were we? What had just happened? And that's when I heard it, a faint whisper echoing in the darkness, chilling me to the core. Stay with us, the hunt was far from over. In the pitch black, my heart raced as confusion took hold. I could feel the cold air lifting and shifting around me, as if something was breathing down my neck. I strained to hear more than just the white noise of silence, but the evenness of my own breathing seemed deafening. Where are we? I whispered, my voice trembling. The girl pressed close, her body trembling against mine. I don't know, she replied, her breath shaky. But we need to move. I fumbled forward, reaching out to find any solid surface. The texture felt rough against my fingers. Stainless steel? I brushed against something sharp, and I quickly drew my hand back. A sudden flicker of light cut through the darkness. It wasn't too bright, but enough to momentarily illuminate our surroundings, a dim bulb swinging from above, clinging to the ceiling with stubborn defiance. Over there! She urged, pointing toward a faint glow spilling in from a narrow passage to our left. We can get out that way. Cautiously, I nodded, feeling my pulse quicken again. Every sense was on high alert. The whisper earlier echoed in my ears, coaxing me to hesitate. Still, the thought of staying here, lost in the dark, sent a shiver down my spine. Together, we sidled toward the flickering light, moving carefully in case anything waited to be discovered in the shadows. As we stepped into the passage, a low moan resonated, coiling around us like tendrils of smoke. I paused, my breath hitching in my throat. Did you hear that? The girl nodded, her eyes wide with terror. We have to keep going, she urged. I wanted to argue, to question whether we were trading one danger for another, but I didn't have time. The moaning grew louder, more insistent, punctuated by the shuffling of something that felt far too close. Come on! I urged, pulling her along, and together we stumbled into the corridor. The wall seemed to close in on us, narrowing as we rushed forward, drawn by the flickering light that promised safety. Then I froze. A dim shape emerged beneath the buzzing light. It was a figure, gaunt and shadow-like, barely recognizable but unmistakably humanoid. Its limbs contorted unnaturally, causing the hair on my arms to stand on end. Stay back! I shouted, pushing the girl behind me instinctively as I brandished the scalpel. The figure tilted its head in an eerie mimicry of understanding, its mouth stretching into a grin that sent ice flooding through my veins. "Let me in, let me stay," it rasped, the words slithering through the air like a hiss. "No!" I shouted again, terror surging through me. I backed away, my hands shaking. The girl's grip tightened on my arm, and I could feel her fear blending with mine. "What does it mean?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I don't know," I stammered. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but that figure felt like a tether to something worse lurking in the dark. Then, without warning, it lunged forward, a blur of shadow and desperation. I swung the scalpel, narrowly missing, and we scrambled back down the hallway. I had no plan, no direction, all I could think was to run. But as we sprinted, the passage ahead started to expand, revealing a larger room, and in that wide open space, the whispers grew louder, no longer a single voice, but a chorus rising and falling around us. The moment I stepped into the room, the air twisted thick with dread. That's when I realized, this wasn't just one figure anymore. Shadowy shapes curled in every corner, eyes flashing threateningly in the dim light. Panic rose like bile in my throat. "Run!" I screamed as I grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her deeper into the chaos of shifting shadows. I fought to keep my footing as confusion swirled around me. I could barely think straight. But in the midst of the chaos, one thought landed solidly: the hunt had truly begun. The shadows seemed to swell like a dark tide, pressing in on us from all sides. Breathing heavily, I dragged the girl further into the room, desperate for an escape. The whispers swirled around me, indistinct yet somehow filled with malice. Each word felt like a knife, slicing through the grip of fear that was tightening around my chest. "Where do we go?" she gasped, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. I glanced around, searching for an exit, for some shred of hope in this suffocating darkness. The room shifted, illusions playing tricks on me. Was that a door? I squinted towards a faint outline ahead, illuminated only by the ghostly glow. "Over there!" I shouted, pointing, even as a swell of dread washed over me. In the moment I turned, the dark figures shifted. They moved with a fluidity that suggested they weren't bound by the same laws of reality as we were. A sense of dread filled me. They weren't just watching anymore. They were closing in. The girl dug her nails into my arm. "Hurry!" We charged toward the shadowy outline, the whispers coiling around us like a storm. Each step echoed like thunder in my ears. I could feel the shapes lurking just beyond the periphery of my vision, pursuing us. I glanced back, and in that instant, I saw one lunging toward us, its face twisted into something dreadful and warped. "Go! Go!" I yelled, fear flooding my system. The door loomed closer, a promise of escape I desperately needed. But every ounce of my being screamed that we weren't alone. Just as our hands brushed the cool metal of the door, it swung open with a creaking groan that sent shivers down my spine. I propelled us through, slamming it shut behind us. For a heartbeat, silence fell, a heavy blanket draped over my pounding heart, but it didn't last. The thumping started almost immediately, reverberating through the door, relentless and ominous. They were still out there. "What is this place?" the girl whispered, her voice strained. I swallowed hard, surveying the dimly lit room we had entered. It looked like some sort of storage area, filled with rusted shelves and scattered medical supplies. Creeping shadows loomed in the corners, making everything seem menacing. "I'm not sure," I replied cautiously. "But we can't stay here. We need to find another way out." I moved to the side, pushing aside dust-laden boxes, revealing a narrow opening behind the shelves, an old maintenance tunnel. It looked like it hadn't been used in ages, but it might lead us away from the figures outside. "Stay close," I instructed, taking the lead. Each step felt heavy with caution as I crawled through the tight space, the air stale and thick. The girl followed closely, her breathing sharp with urgency. As we moved deeper, I could still hear the thudding on the door, a reminder of the danger we had escaped but that still hovered just outside. Then I realized, the whispers were different now. They were no longer chaotic, they formed a single, chilling phrase that echoed in my mind: "Let us in." I stumbled, suddenly frantic. "We need to hurry." Just as I forced myself to push on, I felt a presence creeping into the tunnel behind us, a rush of cold air that chilled my skin. I looked back, and all I could see were fleeting shadows slipping inside the narrow entrance we had just squeezed through. Faster! I gasped. The claustrophobic space pressed around me as I propelled forward, the echo of their whispers growing fainter but more insistent. Then, in the dark ahead, a flicker of light caught my attention, cutting through the gloom. I stumbled toward it, heart racing, unsure of what lay beyond. What I found left me breathless, caught in a web of questions that spiraled as fear clawed at my throat. "Where are we?" the girl whispered, and as I opened my mouth to answer, I realized I had no idea. That's when I saw it. The light wasn't salvation, but a trap waiting to snap shut. And in that moment, I understood the hunt was far from over. I took a cautious step toward the source of the flickering light. It pulsed like a heartbeat, beckoning yet ominous. My instincts screamed that we needed to retreat, but curiosity rooted me to the spot. The girl, sensing my hesitation, tugged at my sleeve. "It's coming," she warned, her voice barely more than a whisper. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. I turned, but the tunnel behind us was thick with darkness. The whispers had quieted, leaving only the faint echo of our hurried breaths. I crouched low, peering into the light. It revealed a small room, dramatically different from the damp tunnel. The walls were lined with what looked like old medical equipment, some covered in dust, others gleaming as if they had just been polished. A stark contrast to the rest of this place. "What is this?" I muttered, stepping closer to the edge of the glow. The light flickered again, growing steadier now. In the center of the room stood a table draped in a white sheet. My heart raced as I approached, dread mingled with a morbid curiosity. I pulled the sheet back, revealing not a body, but a series of photographs and documents, each one dated and meticulously arranged. I flipped through them, horrified and fascinated at the same time. Each image captured faces twisted in agony, their eyes wide with terror. The names printed below were unrecognizable victims, I surmised. Desperate for answers, I scanned the papers. "That looks like the girl," began, pointing at one of the photos. I turned to see her trembling, her features ghostly pale. "I think I know her," she stammered. My stomach dropped, a sinking feeling flooding through me. "What do you mean, you know her?" "She is from my school," she replied, her voice trembling. "She disappeared last month." I stumbled back, shock crashing over me. These were not just random victims, they were people, real lives intertwined with our own. I struggled to process the implications. Then, the thumping returned, louder and more frenzied than before. It was a relentless drum, pounding against the walls of this small sanctuary. I glanced around, searching for a way out, but the doors were nowhere in sight. I grabbed the girl's hand, panic setting in. "We have to get out of here." But before we could move, the room shuddered. The light flickered once more, and my gaze fell upon a shadow creeping from the depths of the storage area, a figure emerging, blending into the white brightness. My breath caught in my throat. The figure stepped closer, revealing nothing but darkness where a face should be. The whispers returned, rising in a crescendo, "Let us in." Suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled, and I lost my footing. We crashed to the floor as dust swirled around us, thickening the air. "Get up! We have to go!" I shouted, urgency clawing at my throat. As I struggled to regain my balance, I felt the sharp edge of the papers beneath my fingertips. I had no idea what lay upstairs or what I would do if we faced the figure. But one thing was clear, we couldn't stay in this room, and whatever had come through that tunnel wouldn't stop until it had what it wanted. I pulled the girl to her feet. "That way." I pointed, urging her toward the back wall, where a faint outline of a door started to shimmer in the chaos. Determination surged through me. Whatever chased us was gaining ground, and each second counted. I bolted toward the shimmering outline, dragging the girl alongside me. With each hurried step toward the door, I could feel the oppressive shadows swirling behind us, the whispers rising in a frantic chorus, urging us to slow down, to surrender. "Let us in, let us stay," they called, each echo like a hammer driving dread deeper into my chest. Just as we reached the door, it swung open on its own with a heavy creak, revealing a stark white corridor illuminated by flickering lights that seemed to flicker in sync with my heartbeat. I hesitated, glancing back into the chaotic room where the figure lingered, its shape shifting and twisting menacingly. "Now!" I urged, and we rushed through the doorway into the pale light. The corridor stretched endlessly before us, its sterile environment almost suffocating. I glanced back and caught a glimpse of the shadows slinking through the door behind us. No way was I going to let them in. It felt like a sprint against time. The crisp scent of antiseptic filled the air, infusing the tension with a volatile undercurrent. We ran, following the corridor's path. I didn't know where we were going, but ignorance felt better than standing still while shadows clawed at our backs. I focused on the girl whose little hand I was gripping tightly, guiding her through the maze of hallways. "Which way?" I asked, catching my breath for a moment as I scanned for signs. She hesitated, visibly frightened, but a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "I think I know a way, to the front." She pointed to the left where the corridor veered sharply. "Let us go." And we turned sharply, running down the hall. The space began to twist, sensations of vertigo pulling and stretching reality around us. My anxiety surged. Shadows played on the periphery, creeping closer, but we pressed on. The girl led the way, her determination like a light beaconing through the growing darkness. As we approached what looked like a set of double doors at the end of the hallway, something shifted in my peripheral vision. I felt a cold gust of air rush through me, and adrenaline surged anew. We weren't safe yet. "Almost there!" she shouted, and I was filled with hope as we reached the doors. They stood ajar, inviting yet threatening all the same. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices begging, pleading, and screaming all at once. I pushed the door, and to my horror, it flung open, and a gradient of shadows poured into the corridor. "Close it!" she yelled, and in a blind panic, I threw my weight against the door. A cold hand curled around the edge, but I pushed harder. For a split second, I could see the figure looming beyond, eyes glinting darkly with an urgency that screamed, "Stay." Then silence fell, the door held firm, solid against the weight of the shadow. With a breathless gasp, we stood together on the threshold. I leaned back against the door, trembling. "Did we get away?" I whispered, my voice quaking. "I think so," she said softly, but we both knew the truth lingered in the air like an unwanted guest. The whispers faded to hushed murmurs, hanging like a fog around us, their insistent pleas still echoing in my mind. I caught a glance at the girl's face, fear and determination fighting for dominance in her eyes. "We can't go back," I muttered, uncertain if the shadows had truly receded, or if they were merely waiting, biding their time. "Let us find a way out," she said, firm. I nodded. Together, we steeled ourselves and moved away from the door. With each step forward, the air felt charged, carrying a weight that only deepened the chasm of uncertainty between what was real and what might be been imagined. I led the way through darkened corridors, half expecting to hear those haunting whispers again. We passed empty rooms filled with remnants of lives interrupted. The oppressive atmosphere held tales of those who had vanished. Sometimes, I thought I saw movement just out of the corner of my eye, hints of shadows shifting. As we finally approached a staircase leading up, the dim light flickered, almost as if inviting us to question our next steps. "We're getting closer," I said. But doubt crept into my chest, the fear that what was behind us would follow. We climbed the stairs, my heart thudding in tandem with each footstep as uncertainty loomed heavily. Were we truly escaping? Or were we simply wandering deeper into the heart of whatever this place held? As we reached the top, a door awaited us, bathed in a harsh fluorescent light. It looked like the outside world could be just beyond. The girl's breath quickened beside me, and I took a moment to cast one last glance back down the staircase. Shadows danced in the corners, uninvited and watching intently. "Ready?" I asked, fear lacing my voice with a tinge of hope. "More than ever," she replied, with a deep breath. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. Light flooded in, blinding for a moment, and I stepped forward, uncertain of what lay beyond, suddenly feeling that perhaps the journey was only just beginning. "Are we free?" I whispered, stepping into the brilliance. Behind me, the dim corridor faded into whispers once more, leaving behind questions unanswered. I turned back to look, but the door swung shut with a resounding thud, sealing our fate. Would the shadows remain behind or follow me, waiting for another chance to pull me into the depths again? The melody lingered in my ears, a reminder that whatever chased us wasn't finished yet. But for now, at least, we had escaped barely.